overlap. My name is LaShawn M. Wanak. I am a science fiction and fantasy writer. I write short fiction. I write essays, I write poetry. I also just wrote a house for an organization called Meow Wolf. They are an arts entertainment collective, and they have sites all over the Southwest. They just recently opened up one in Grapevine, Texas, and I wrote the story for that, so yay. I'm also the editor of Giganotosaurus. So, short fiction magazine, we publish one story per month. Oh, there she is, yay! Really, I was just stalling.
We're content right now, right?
Okay, yes. So now I can introduce our guest panelists today. I will let them introduce themselves. So starting.
I'll start. Yeah. Okay. I'm Dedren Snead here with Zoo Studios out of Atlanta, Georgia, hoping all y'all are well. Writer and artist, and have a studio called Sown that looks to work in the space of Afrofuturism, where we look to focus on a lot of African history, diaspora stories. But basically, we write a lot of things about girls that beat up monsters. And so the idea of how do they do that in a historical and contextual space, we're here to talk about today. So thank you all so much.
I'm Howard Andrew Jones. I'm a writer now with Baen. I had a historical fantasy series about sort of the ancient Arabia crossed with Sherlock Holmes for St. Martin's. I think that's one of the reasons I'm on the panel. And the other one is that I'm writing a story that has, writing a new series for Baen that basically is like the ancient Mediterranean with the serial numbers filed off, starring someone based off of Hanuvar of Carthage. So that's this. It just came out 2 days ago, so I'm still super thrilled about that. And anyway, here I am. Glad to be here.
Hey everyone. Oh, hello everyone. My name is Baen. My pronouns are she and her. I'm the executive editor at Dervan Books, which is a boutique speculative fiction house. I've had 15 years plus in publishing, working in various areas, from international sales and marketing to book clubs to social media. I had previously worked at Tor for almost a decade, and I've also done podcast work with Realm, which is a genre audio drama studio.
All right. So we're just going to dive in, and I'm actually going to start by asking one of the questions that's in the description to read it for y'all. Historical fiction has been an integral part of fantasy from the very start of the genre and remains a core influence in the works of many prominent fantasy authors. So, to my panelists, how are authors inspired by history and classic and current works? How are you all inspired by history in your works?
Well, can I go first? I mean, that's the biggest inspiration for me right here. Since I was 16, I've been fascinated with Hanuvar of Carthage and the Roman Republic. And I got to explore it with this new series. I mean, what I didn't know is that I was actually accidentally researching it because I was fascinated. But I ended up turning it into a book series. So, history. I've been a history nerd all my life. I love the stories that it contains. I love the characters that are in there. I love the what ifs that it suggests. Like, oh, what if these events hadn't happened this way? What if someone hadn't killed that queen? What if this king hadn't been a jerk? Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. Likewise, I feel like pursuit of history, particularly a love of feudal Japan. I mean, that started a run of wanting to know all things about Japan, animation, and manga, and the idea of trying to make my own. And even thinking of fantastic stories, which feel like they're historical, things like Arthurian legend and Canterbury tales. I mean, these parts feel like they're a part of our canon and people. And just seeing this intersection of seeing fantastic in a way that it almost felt like it happened. That's the things that really drew me into trying to build my own stories in spaces like that.
Yeah, so as an editor, I'm just always fascinated by stories that can highlight or uplift or just give perspective on different parts of the world. Because I started international sales marketing, it really gives me a lot of perspective about different leaderships, and the backgrounds where people are coming from. I think that had impacted my editorial taste later on. And also, outside of all the publishing stuff, I was pretty active in the steampunk community for several years and ran a blog about multicultural steampunk called Beyond Victoriana. And I'm just, in general, intrigued by history and their what-ifs. What if, India was, the country that colonized, Great Britain, for example, or what if the Babbage machine, really took off, and Ada Lovelace became a more prominent, historical figure than she already is. So I just am very intrigued by ways we can use storytelling to really question what our social, norms are and how we can imagine it in even further interesting ways.
Sorry, I am writing questions as we speak. So, but yes, let's start discussing. What are the pros and the cons and the pitfalls in using historical influence in fantasy works? I know, for instance, a pro on a level of, there are some really awesome books that are coming out that explores histories of the whole Afrofuturism movement, for instance. We're exploring African works and being exposed to African history that normally we're not taught in the classrooms and make us want to do more. So that's a pro.
Absolutely. And I think to that end, I think the pro of being able to have this platform to do so is that we're able to tell underrepresented stories. I think we've seen a lot of iterations of similar spaces and stories when we think of what we all think of a general historical context, but as we as people try to understand and appreciate our culture, and again look at where some new and untapped stories and spaces of inspiration and intrigue, a lot of it is that the historical context that we all understand a lot of times is just simply based on the way that history's been, where the victors write the history, right? And so a lot of times people that are marginalized or underrepresented simply have their histories, erased or unfortunately not represented in the best light. So I think this gives us a way to just highlight and understand and just build a larger cultural understanding of who we are as people. And so looking at Afrofuturism in the space that I try to work towards is that we're looking at where people have been successful in the space, where places of resistance have been inspirational, and I think it is just overwhelmingly positive to look at history so that we do learn these lessons, right? This other part is that there's so much solution space in what's already happened, and so we feel like things are always new, but a lot of times it's that history doesn't. There's the thing.
It doesn't repeat, it echoes.
It rhymes, that's right. It doesn't, yeah.
Rhymes.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Thank you. So the idea is there's a lot of meat on the bone in the historical sense, and every time you go back, there's a new story.
I like what Dedren just said there. I'm in complete agreement with that as far as the positive aspects of it. And then there's also, it fosters a sense of connection, fosters a sense of humanity. We realize, even with these people whom we feel separated by a vast gulf of time, that we actually have a whole lot of things in common with them. That they were worried about many similar things. They were worried about their loved ones, and how they were going to keep their people fed, how they were going to survive the next day. And you understand how some of the tough choices that they had to make may have influenced the way we got to our current world and our current situations.
And to jump off of what Howard said, I do think that a lot of recent and by recent I define like last 500 years, as much as people, think, oh, that's so long ago, like how is it relevant to us now? There is a lot of historical patterns that were just set up, generations and generations ago that still have evolved and progressed and affected us to this very day, for good or for ill. And we can always bring in how history is like relevant to our current cultural conversation. One of the things that I often hear from people nowadays is like, oh, we're in a new Gilded Age. And the Gilded Age was a time of robber barons, it was a time of like mass labor movements, it was a time of really great discrepancies between the haves and have-nots. And all of those like play out in fascinating ways that I think, because history rhymes, we can still draw lessons from it and incorporate it into our own fiction. And one of the challenges actually of writing fantasy, in history, at least from like an editorial perspective, is thinking about like artistic accountability versus creative license. So what I mean by that is that if you are a creator, you can do anything you want with your story. You can put in like any sort of like twist to the world building.